Hello, hello. It is Wednesday, November 14th, 2018. This is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. What is up, everyone? I hope all you guys out there are having a wonderful little start to your Wednesday, or maybe your Thursday or your Friday, wherever you're listening to this. Either way, thank you
It's not Friday anywhere. What are you talking about? Where is it Friday?
This show is a podcast as well, Mark. People listen to it throughout the week. How dare you? I haven't even introduced you, sir. Come on.
It's not even Friday yet. Come on, it's Wednesday.
I'm setting it up for people who listen later, buddy.
Let's live in the moment. Let's live in the moment.
All right. Well, I hope your day is going extremely well, regardless of which day it is from Mr. Raimondi over here. Either way, we thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate it. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti, and we have a ton of stuff to discuss today. It is a busy schedule, as always. Before we get into any of that, let me bring in the man who already brought himself in. My other half here on this fine show. He is still back home in Los Angeles, coming at you mid-weight cut from the MMA Fighting Sweatbox, Mr. Marc Raimondi. How are you doing, Marc?
Oh, I'm just peachy, Shaun. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How's the week going? I know you had a little bit of work going in LA yesterday.
I was at the fantastic Liddell versus Ortiz 3 media workouts in West Hollywood, and that was something. It was. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens next week when those two guys actually fight. But it was fun. It was fun, the workouts. I'm looking forward to checking out that whole Golden Boy MMA promotion deal next week. So we'll see. We'll see.
I think the word something is the best way to describe whatever it is that we're about to see with all this. But hey, let's get right to it. Like I said, there's a ton to discuss today. We got the good, the bad, and the ugly from UFC Denver. The first UFC show in Argentina, that's coming up this weekend. Plus Bellator, Invicta, whatever you guys want to talk about. Because as we
I wish I was in Buenos Aires. Why am I not in Buenos Aires?
I know our Guilherme Cruz is over there. He's getting all the good assignments. We're just sitting over here in the West Coast doing nothing.
Look, I'm in a box right now. I could be on the beach.
But as we always say, guys, this is your show. So whatever you guys want us to talk about today, we will be glad to talk about it. You can ask us a question on the MMA Fighting page below. Whatever you, I mean, I already said that part, but any question that gets 3 recommendations, those will turn green. Those will get priority. Or ask us a question on Twitter using the hashtags the A-Side or Chat Rappers. Replay of this podcast is going to be up immediately following the show on YouTube. It'll also be up on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever else you get your pods later today. And if there's somewhere out there that it's not up, that you get your podcasts from, tell us. Tell Marc and I. We'll fix it immediately. And with that, let's get this train rolling, Marc. Let's dive into some questions. But first, we do have some breaking news on this Wednesday morning. There is a few items to address coming from the Nevada Athletic Commission that I believe just finished up or maybe still going. Can you kind of update everybody on what's going on?
Yeah, so there was a Nevada Athletic Commission meeting this morning, Wednesday morning, and it addressed some of the, I guess, peripheral players in the UFC 229 Khabib versus McGregor post-fight brawl. A few of the peripheral people who got into it after the fight were up for an extension of their temporary suspension in Nevada. Those people were Dillon Danis, Abubakar Nurmagomedov. They both received extensions to those temporary suspensions this morning, Wednesday morning, and they will have to go before the commission for disciplinary hearings. There was also Zabira Takugov was temporarily suspended, but it looks like, according to MMAfighting.com, those 3 guys are going to be suspended, I guess, indefinitely until that disciplinary hearing, which is not it's not set yet. Hopefully, they don't do it the same day as the McGregor Khabib disciplinary hearing, which is December 10th in Las Vegas, because that would just be a complete mess. It would be the longest Nevada meeting ever.
Yeah,
there were a few other people.
Meeting. That would be a 5-hour commission meeting.
Exactly. And there were a few other people who were also on the agenda for possible extensions to their temporary suspensions on Wednesday. That was Rizvan Magomedov, who was part of Khabib's management team, and Esadullah Amiragayev, who was the man, of course, who jumped into the cage wearing the red shirt and who went after McGregor post-fight, who actually punched him in the back of the head post fight. So those people were on the agenda, but those cases were not addressed today. So I guess that's something that we'll deal with in the future. But it's going to be a busy next few months as far as the Nevada Athletic Commission goes, because they have a lot of disciplinary hearings on their hands moving forward. December 10th will be, of course, the first one where the two main principals in this case will be addressed, McGregor and Nurmagomedov, and then either that day or in the future in January they'll deal with Danis and Abubakar Nurmagomedov and Zubair Tukhugov and whoever else was involved in this crazy October 6th UFC 229 brawl.
Yeah, and also I believe Shaun O'Malley was given a 6-month suspension for his testing failure, although that is also waiting on USADA to really figure out, give their discipline. So still much to be waited for that. None of this we can move past this. None of this is really surprising. I think this is just the process. This is how it plays out. Athletic commissions take a very long time to do very little.
Yeah, as far as the UFC 229 brawl participants, that was, they were going to get the extension to their suspension today, without a doubt. That's just protocol. The same thing that we addressed a few weeks ago with Khabib and Conor. It's just the commission process. It's basically that. And then as far as O'Malley goes, Shaun tested positive for ostarine, of course, in an out of competition test in relation to UFC 229. He was pulled from that fight, provisionally suspended by USADA, and he got a 6-month suspension from the commission. And as you said, we're still waiting on USADA to determine how long he's out. So the commission says 6 months, but USADA could say 9 months. They could say a year. We don't really know what USADA will say. We have to wait on that. It could take a little bit longer. But as for now, that's pretty much it. And Cody McKenzie is also up for a disciplinary hearing, I think, right now as we're talking. We're not sure. Apparently, he bailed on a drug test at a regional event in Las Vegas recently, and he's up for a suspension. So that's pretty much what we know right now from the NAC meeting on Wednesday morning.
Good info, man. And good old Cody McKenzie. He's always getting into something. My sole takeaway from this before we move on is how somehow this whole UFC thing affects Bellator, man, because you can be sure they would like to book Dillon Danis right now while he's still hot. And he's just being basically held out because of something he did at a UFC event. And he is just unable to be booked for, the early part of their 2019 schedule. And they would love to throw him in there until this gets figured out.
Oh, Bellator, I believe from what I've heard, Bellator wanted him on that show in January, the one that's going up against UFC 233, the card that's headlined by Fedor Emelianenko versus Ryan Bader, but they can't book him until this Nevada thing is situated, until they get this all figured out, and that could be another 2 months or more.
Yeah, this could stretch on forever. So I like how somehow Bellator is getting affected by all this UFC BS. But hey, that is enough housekeeping for us. Let's jump into your questions. That's the point of this show. So we will start today from the MMA Fighting comments coming from JF Heichel. It's not the first comment, but we'll revisit you, the Empire. We have not skipped you. But his question's coming about Chuck Liddell open workout. Did the footage for the Chuck Liddell open workout do anything to assuage or exacerbate your concerns about whether he can reasonably compete with Tito Ortiz? 48-year-old Chuck Liddell, Marc, you were on the scene. We have seen some training footage from Chuck in the lead up to this fight that has been, let's say, less than impressive. What did it look like in person? Was it as painfully slow and old manish in person as it seemed to be on the internet?
So the concerns that people have about Chuck Liddell are not necessarily about him being competitive against Tito Ortiz. It's him being in a good place health-wise, physically, to not get hurt more than someone would in an MMA fight. He's 48 years old. He hasn't fought in 8 years. So the question is not so much, will he be competitive? That's for the fight to determine. It's can he be up to the standard of being in an MMA fight against someone like Tito Ortiz? And I think the answer is yes. As far as how the fight will go, I don't know, and I don't know how much a workout can really tell you about that. Chuck Liddell has never really looked all that impressive during workouts, even in the past. Even when he was in his prime, he was never a guy that stood out on the mitts necessarily. And there was the workout on Tuesday in West Hollywood at King's MMA, and he definitely didn't look as fast as Tito. He did not look as agile as Tito. He did not look as athletic as Tito. Still looks like he hits pretty damn hard, though. And that could be, of course, a difference in that fight. So it's really hard to say what that means as far as a workout goes. I mean, we've seen people look amazing in workouts and then look terrible in a fight. So you don't really know. The jury is still out. As far as do I think that Chuck Liddell is healthy enough and is with it enough to fight in an MMA fight next week? I think so. I think he's in good shape. I think he's fine. I think that Tito's 43, Chuck is 48. It's not a crazy difference in age, although Tito has been much more active. I still have some reservations about this fight, and I'm probably going to go into it with a little bit of like, all right, let's just hope that everyone gets out of this healthy. But I didn't come away thinking like, oh man, Chuck Liddell is in danger more than an MMA fighter would be in danger in a regular fight.
I mean, I won't lie. I do have a little bit of worries, right? Because I was at the Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie fight that Bellator did a few years ago, and going into that fight, I don't think there was concern, despite the fact that both of these guys were advanced in age and hadn't competed for a while, because they were both kind of on the same plane. They both were more or less coming at this from a place of just having sat on the sidelines for a long time and not really been competitive fighting for a long time. That's not the case here, man. I do have a little bit of concerns going into this, just watching what we've seen from Chuck Liddell over the weeks leading into this, because Tito Ortiz just last year was a very, very competitive MMA fighter. He has been active, like you said, over the last several years. He's been more or less his normal self, the very competitive Tito Ortiz for the last several years, beating guys and fighting guys who are very good. Chuck Liddell hasn't done this for 8 years, and he was on his way out when he left the sport. I am a little worried about what this is going to look like by the time the fight night comes. But I mean, this is this is what it is, man. I will say, it feels as though a lot of the buzz has died down for it compared to where it was maybe a month or two ago. And I wonder if that's just a product of people seeing the Liddell type of footage and that sort of thing, or if it's the complete and utter lack of back and forth that we've gotten in the promotion for this fight. Because people may say Oscar De La Hoya is a tremendous promoter in boxing, and maybe he is. I don't follow boxing nearly as close as I do in MMA, but he is botching this promotion of this fight so badly. There has been no back and forth whatsoever, and that's what's going to bring people to this. It feels like the momentum has completely died for this fight.
Yeah, I mean the buzz. It doesn't feel like the buzz is there, and there was a good amount of media at media workouts on Tuesday, but yeah, it does feel like the buzz where in July, before the fight was actually announced, when those two guys were at the UFC Hall of Fame ceremony and kind of got into it a little bit, at that point it felt like, okay, they have something here, but it has died down a little bit, and they haven't really done a good job getting them together to interact all that much. They had that press conference at the Canelo Triple G weigh-ins. They've done a few TV spots here in LA, but nothing that has really kind of moved the needle. As far as to go back for a second to the whole Liddell health situation, I would encourage people to go on to the MMA Fighting YouTube page or MMAfighting.com and check out my interview on Tuesday with Antonio McKee, who, interestingly enough, is Chuck Liddell's head coach for this fight against Tito Ortiz. And Antonio McKee is a guy, if you know him, he does not mince words. He's very blunt and he's very honest. And he said when the call came for him initially to coach Chuck Liddell, he was hesitant, to say the least. He said he thought that Chuck Liddell was washed up and he really wasn't interested in coaching Liddell. And then he said he'll give him like a trial period of 2 weeks. And at first he was very worried after seeing what Chuck looked like in the gym. But he said after 2 weeks and after being with him now for a little bit, he's very impressed about how far he's come in that amount of time. So I would encourage people to check that out. And if you're a little worried, I think watch that interview with Antonio McKee. You may be a little less worried, but I can understand the reluctance to get all in on this fight.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's keep it moving. Next cut coming from the MMA Fighting page from Abdul Riff, who wants to talk about UFC Denver. Questions about the female featherweight and bantamweight divisions. What is next for Germaine de Randamie? He writes, I saw on some social media posts that she climbed back into the rankings as already number 2 bantamweight behind Holly Holm. Should the UFC maybe book the rematch and do Holly versus GDR2 to determine the next bantamweight contender? Or do you guys think Megan Zagano is the title eliminator fight for the next featherweight contender after Cyborg Nunes. That this question kind of changed gears completely mid-sentence. But after Cyborg Nunes,
change divisions, change gears.
Yeah. And speaking of Cyborg, is she going to stay with UFC in 2019? Okay, so there's a lot there. Let's just focus on Germaine de Randamie right now. So she picked up, man, a big win at UFC Denver, coming back for the first time in a long time. And it was a very emotional win for her. What did you think overall of just generally her reemergence, I guess, in the MMA scene, and also just what's her path moving forward now?
Yeah, I was really impressed. I was impressed by her performance against Raquel Pennington. And honestly, Shaun, while watching that fight, I was thinking to myself, I don't think that Amanda Nunes runs over Germaine de Randamie. I think that would actually be a fairly competitive fight. Now, whether or not she deserves that next, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because there's all that backstory with de Randamie. She had the UFC featherweight title on the women's side, and she basically relinquished it or had it stripped because she wouldn't fight Chris Cyborg. So I don't see the UFC running to give Germaine de Randamie another title shot anytime soon. I could see her having to at least win one or two more. Now, that division is very much in flux, and it's in a really weird spot because Nunes is out of the division for now, fighting Chris Cyborg at featherweight for that title, of course, at UFC 232 in December. And then you have kind of a mishmash of possible contenders. And I still think Holly Holm is a top contender, if not the top contender for Nunes's title, even though her last two fights was a 145, and one of them was the loss to Cyborg. So it's all very confusing. It would be interesting, though, Shaun, from a story perspective, to have Holm and de Randamie rematch at 135 after all that drama in the first fight. It could be Holm's chance to kind of show that she is the better fighter after those late blows and after the controversy with the referee Todd Anderson. So part of me wants to see that fight, although I don't know if Holly Holm, I don't know if she really needs that win to be the top contender for Nunes. I would love to see Nunes versus Holm. I think that would be a phenomenal fight. And then as far as to go into the other part of the question about Chris Cyborg and the featherweight division, I do feel like Cyborg stays with the UFC in 2019. I think that a lot of her talk about boxing and about moving on and WWE, I think a lot of that is posturing and negotiating. As far as the next featherweight contender, it could be Zingano if she beats Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson, though, already lost to Holly Holm, which, by the way, I thought that fight made no sense. I don't know why they put Holm and Anderson together at UFC 225 earlier this year, because it killed off a contender for Cyborg, which there aren't many of those. So I'm not sure. I think if Zingano wins, I think she's next. But if Anderson wins, she just lost to Holm. So I'm not sure what you do from there, honestly. And there's really nobody else in that division. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to go back to Germaine de Randamie for a second, because you're right on a lot of levels, right? Because that fight wasn't the most exciting thing in the world against Raquel this weekend. And I know a lot of people, a lot of y'all out there probably really dislike her immensely. And I guess I can understand where a lot of that's coming from. But I really couldn't help but feel good about what she did on Saturday, man. Seeing someone who so obviously had been through so much pain and heartache have like a really feel-good moment like that. We don't really get that a lot in this sport. And like her scrum afterwards, if you guys haven't watched it, go watch it on MMA Fighting's YouTube, was probably one of the most emotional scrums I've seen in quite a bit. I mean, she was in tears quickly, just talking about the road that she's been on. And I guess all that she feels like she's had to overcome and all the hatred she's gotten and what it's taken to come back. And also, I mean, she revealed that like she basically almost went blind and still might have like nerve damage in her eyes. And she wasn't even sure if she would get cleared to fight Pennington until like a few weeks ago, which I can't even imagine what that must have been feeling like, because you know exactly as much as I do what the public reaction would have been had she been forced to pull out of that fight like a week or two before it. She would have gotten skewered, man. She would have gotten killed, and she had no control over it. So what a win for her. Like I said, it wasn't the most fun or impressive win, but it was a very one-sided win. And it was obvious that she was the better fighter. Also, I think she became one of the only few people in 2018 to actually accept a fight after an opponent missed weight and win. I think that record for people like that is not very good this year. So it's just crazy how things work out, man, because like you said, take a step back and block out the noise. And Germaine de Randamie's UFC resume, 5-1 over 6 fights. Her best wins are Julie Kedzie, Pennington, and Holly Holm. And her only loss is to Amanda Nunes, although Amanda really did blow the doors off her. That was a few years ago, though. So she, like you said, she's ranked number 2 right now. And for whatever that's worth, whatever the rankings are worth, it is conceivable that she really is just one fight away from a title shot, which is crazy considering everything that she has gone through over the past year and the sort of the narrative that has followed her. Also, I think it speaks to the lack of depth in that division. But the history is there with Amanda. I mean, like I said, she already fought her once. The history there is Holly Holm, the history is there with Holly Holm. And of all the active fighters in the top 5 at 135, Holm, Ketlin Vieira, Pennington, Germaine de Randamie only has wins over all of those. Juliana Pena isn't active, so I didn't count her. But Germaine de Randamie has wins over all those but Ketlin Vieira. So if you ask me, I think that should be the fight. Ketlin Vieira versus Germaine de Randamie to set up the next number 1 contender fight, because it really does, like you said, seem like Holly Holm is sort of in the driver's seat right now. She's the number 1 contender for both 35 and 45. She can kind of pick and choose what she wants to do, and I'm sure she will after UFC 232. So the home rematch would be really nice with Germaine. That would be really interesting. Like you said, there's a story there, and it feels like it could be a moment of maybe redemption for Germaine de Randamie, especially considering the way that went down. If she was able to beat Holly again in a less controversial sense, I think that would really do a lot in sort of turning fan sentiment for her around. But the home fight or the Ketlin Vieira fight are my 2 picks for her. Regardless, it's an incredible comeback story here for her.
Yeah, we just have to see how long Vieira is out from her knee injury. I think that might be a fairly serious one. So we'll see. We'll see if that time matches up. Let's move on back to the MMAfighting.com comments from Lodovic. Last UFC fight night. That's the UFC Denver, by the way. Besides that sick elbow, who or what impressed you guys the most last Saturday? Also, if it for some reason wasn't Maycee Barber, could you talk a little bit about her as well? I didn't know a 20-year-old, 115-pounder is capable of drowning her opponent in her own blood, and that post-fight interview was pretty good too. Do you think that fight against Mackenzie Dern will be next?
I am going to talk about Maycee Barber, because that was the one that stood out the most to me outside of the two big ones, the main and the co-main. Because you're right, man. For a 20-year-old kid to have such a fleshed out and self-aware sense of the game, just in general, of everything that encompasses this game, that was the thing that stood out to me and impressed me the most, because we already knew going in that Maycee Barber had skills. I mean, we knew that she was powerful, that she's fast. Her stand-up, her karate style stand-up is really above what a normal 20-year-old athlete is at this point, and she has proven finishing ability. But for her to be able to step in there from an empty Contender Series gym straight into just a booming Pepsi Center in Denver, at which I will add she basically got one of the biggest ovations of the night because she was the hometown favorite there, and still be able to perform with excellence and maintain such a high fight IQ in her UFC debut in such a crazy environment like that, I feel like that's pretty telling. Like, that poise and that confidence cannot be overstated on how difficult it is to find someone like that at 20 years old, because she wasn't getting a gimme in her debut. The UFC wasn't easing her in. Like, Hannah Cifers is a really damn good prospect herself, and someone who has someone with just ridiculous amount of strength. So for Maycee to go in there and just show off what she did, like, it was very impressive, man. She has an uncommon ferocity on the ground, like ground and pound, that's just really brutal for that 115-pound division. She looks like she's been doing this for her entire life. And the clinch work, I know our own Esther Lynn really enjoyed the clinch work. There were all sorts of nasty elbows raining in on Hannah Cifers. That was gruesome to watch, man. Just bathed in blood. I think she's an incredibly exciting prospect at 115. I think the thing we failed to remember with prospects so young is that you got to imagine what these people are going to be doing 4 or 5 years down the road, right? Because Maycee's 20 right now. When she's 24 or 25, has all this world-class experience and has been in this game for that long and will be hitting her prime, she's going to be a problem in this division, man. I don't think the Dern fight happens because they're on sort of different paths. The UFC really doesn't match up these young undefeated prospects altogether that much. And I mean, Dern might even be at 125, but I think she's a future title contender for sure.
Yeah, I think Barber is the definition of a blue chip prospect. The only thing that I will say is that she, like Dern, also has issues making weight. She did make weight on her second attempt last week, but she's 20 years old. She's having trouble making 115 now. What does that mean 5 years from now when she's 25? Because as we know, as fighters get older, it's been said so many times, it's harder to make that weight. So I could see her future also being at 125, maybe like Dern as well. Maybe that fight does happen down the road at that weight. But for right now, yeah, she is something to watch, because not only is she good, but she has that violent streak that we don't always see in the women's 115 division. And you know what? I like that division a lot. Tatiana Suarez coming up. There are prospects. There are established players. I'm very interested in seeing Cynthia Calvillo come back this weekend at the UFC Argentina against Poliana Botelho, who's also a good prospect. So that division has a lot of promise in the future. Real quick, also UFC Denver. I just want to give, since we're talking about some of the standout performances, Davi Ramos again, third straight submission victory, rear naked choke victory. That guy is a monster on the ground at lightweight. I mean, he is an absolute vice. I mean, yeah, that guy is really good. Someone to watch for certain. Obviously, BJJ pedigree, and then also Devontae Smith, a quick knockout against Julian Erosa. I think it was 46 seconds? 46 seconds. Yeah. I mean, that guy looks really good. He's, of course, another Dana White 2-night Contender Series prospect. Stand-up just looks nasty. A lot of power. Also, like a gigantic, lanky lightweight. Also a good prospect. So some outside of the two obvious stories with Rodriguez and boy Cerrone, there were some major prospects to watch out for UFC Denver that we're going to be talking about a lot, I believe, in the future.
See that, and that's always nice too, when you can have these shows where you really get introduced to a whole set of new guard. Like I always enjoy these type of shows where you come away from it really understanding, like, oh, we're gonna be seeing these people for like quite a while. And I will add, I really enjoyed the graphics packages and just all the throwback vibe of the whole event, of all the UFC 1 music and the graphics and everything. Like, all of that stuff still looks so cool to me. Like, that looks better than what it looks than like the normal graphics package and music packages to me. Like, I would prefer that every time over what we get.
Oh, the retro stuff was so great. I loved it. I just wish that they would have reached out and brought in some more of the legends. I know Art Jimerson was there and a few others, but I mean, reach out to some of these. It just felt a little bit empty as a 25th anniversary when you don't have like Royce Gracie there, when you don't have like Ken Shamrock there, when you don't have Art Davey there, or you know, Bob Meyerowitz, or any of these guys who helped launch this thing 25 years ago. It just felt a little bit cold because those guys were not there. John McCarthy, I know he's working for Bellator now, but I mean, these are guys that were really pivotal to the launch of the UFC 25 years ago, and they were nowhere to be found on the anniversary show, which was, I thought that was kind of unfortunate. Yeah,
I agree with you there. It would have been nice to see Bellator legend Royce Gracie just in the audience, just because.
Bellator legend.
One last thing about Maycee Barber, though, before we move on, because I just remembered this, and I feel like I need to say it. I don't know if you saw her interview she did with our own Luke Thomas. I think it was on his radio show, a serious show. But she basically said that he was asked her about being bathed in blood, and like how does she feel about that at the age of 20? Just like, how does she feel when that situation arises? And she said that not only does she not mind it, she wants to get it in her contract so that she can wear all white, so that people can see the blood on her, and that doing that mentally helps her. You said she has uncommon ferocity for a 20-year-old, like finishing these things. My God. No kidding, man. No kidding. Also, I will say she maximized her mic time in a way that very few do in their UFC debut. She did it all week. She was calling out Mackenzie Dern all week. She was saying she's going to be the next big thing. She even has like a countdown on her phone until the day she surpasses John Jones's age, when he became the youngest champ in history. All the right things for Maycee Barber this weekend.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like she was born to do this. So, man, I can't wait to see what, in the next few years for her and how that turns out. Let's move on to the next question from the MMAfighting.com comments from Delceman 19. What promotions stand for? There's been a lot of chatter from UFC fighters who have signed with one championship saying one represents what true MMA is, i.e., no trash talking, drama, or controversy. My point is it fair for people to label the Western promotions as not upholding those values, not being what the sport is? Can one model suffice for all? Is trying to hype a fight a bad thing? as some fans are also interested in some drama and trash talking, keep the fire burning on the A side. Thank you, Delsa man. So I guess the question is, Shaun, all this talk about one championship and them being what martial arts really represents, and Miesha Tate said it on the MMA Hour on Monday about how the Western promotions have become circus-like, and one is more pure martial arts. What do you think? Is that fair?
I mean, it comes off a little disingenuous. I won't lie, like, because all of this is engineered. If you go back from the beginning, UFC 1 was a shit show, just like Miesha Tate said it's a shit show now. Like, it's always been a shit show. Fight promotion in general, even in boxing historically, goes back all the way, man. It's built around drama and the trash talk and all of this. I understand where people could be coming from, maybe like a Demetrius Johnson or Miesha even saying that, the martial arts sense maybe has been lost a little bit. And I can agree with that on some level. It's never been more of a circus than it is today in the WME endeavor, whatever you call it, era. And if the purity of martial arts is what you're looking for, one championship certainly espouses it much more than the UFC and even Bellator. I always thought that was a weird place for Ben Askren because of that, because he just very much didn't fit with the style of promotion that they do over there. No one over there is talking trash, and he was just coming over there firing rockets everywhere. So I can understand on that sense. But man, this game has always been like this. This game has always been a shit show, and these people are just getting paid lots of money to go to one championship. If we're being honest, that's what it is. The cheddar makes it better. And they're getting fat contracts to go over there in Singapore. So that's however you want to moralize it or rationalize it, that's ultimately what it's coming down to.
Let us not forget that when one championship first started, they were not sending that same message that they're sending now. They had fights like Tim Sylvia versus Andrei Arlovsky, which is built on drama and past rivalry, past beef. They had fighters like Phil Baroni talking all kinds of smack. That's how one started in 2012 and 2013. Those were the kind of fighters they were bringing over from the States. And there was a market correction, right? The fans in Asia did not like that. They didn't want Tim Sylvia, Andrei Arlovsky, Phil Baroni. The market corrected itself. That's what works for them. If Tim Sylvia and Andrei Arlovsky worked for them financially, monetarily, one championship would be just like the UFC. But that's not how it went. That's not how it went down, because that's what the market says in Asia. They don't want those type of shenanigans and trash talk. So one championship is only doing what benefits them financially. The same way the UFC is only doing what benefits them financially by pushing the Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov rivalry, by building fights around trash talk. And that's just what the market says. So let's not put one up on a pedestal, because they tried the other way. It just didn't work for them where they're at. They tried that. For the UFC, it works the way it does, and the UFC sold for $4 billion a few years ago to Endeavor, and they just signed a huge deal with ESPN. Things are going real well based on that, whatever they want to call a circus or whatever promotion. One championship tried that circus, did not work for them. They corrected it, and now they're doing very well with the path that they're on. So I can't give them too much credit, because they're just doing. They're just being capitalist. They're looking for what the market says, the same way the UFC is. It's just different markets.
Yeah, I mean, they are doing very well, though. I mean, they just got I think it was $166 million round of funding last month. So that they got a cash infusion, and like I said, it's all about the money, man. They're giving big money to these latest signings. So you can moralize it however you want, but that's what ultimately it's coming down to.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different approach they have. They're not selling pay-per-views necessarily. They have an app. They have all their fights for free now on the app, which is fantastic, by the way. That one app is really sensational to watch fights on. It's so clean and fast, and it's just a great experience, a great user experience on the app. But they're not in the same business as the UFC, but their business model is different. So again, it's hard to compare the two, even though they're both in the same sport. They both have different objectives and goals as far as business. So again, I don't want to give. I think that I don't think that I think what they're saying about martial arts and purity and that kind of thing is, I think that is just their selling point. I'm sure a lot of the guys over there do believe that and feel that. But again, that's only because that's what works for business. If something else worked for business, they would do that something else.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, well, hey, let's move on. Next question is coming from JStore on MMA Fighting, who wants to know about USADA. He writes, USADA has been dark for a few months now. Is that the right call? A few months ago, USADA went dark and stopped reporting doping violations. Since then, the only fighter I recall speaking about a violation is Shaun O'Malley. It seems likely that other fighters have been flagged for violations during this time, and we just don't know about it yet. Is the new system better? He asks. Fighters have chosen to be public figures and live by a certain set of rules. Why shouldn't their USADA violations also be public? Even if you're not in the public eye, if you're charged with a crime, that information is still available to the public, regardless of whether you're eventually exonerated. What do you think, Marc?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's a couple of things that I want to clarify. It's not USADA. USADA hasn't gone dark, as Jay Source says. That change in policy was 100% the UFC change in policy. It was not USADA. The UFC was the one all along that decided to announce the potential violations for fighters. It was not USADA. That's not USADA's policy. It's really up to the UFC to announce. So that's one clarification. It was a UFC change, not a USADA change. And I think ultimately it has been a good thing. And I was resistant at first. I didn't know how it would go, but because over the life of this deal with USADA that the UFC has over the 3 years plus, it seemed like when the UFC announced a potential violation, which basically meant a drug test failure, when the UFC announced this, it seemed like there was immediately negativity and venom cast on the fighter who was the subject of this, whether no matter what the eventual outcome would be. There was an immediate. I mean, fans went after these fighters when that was announced, like, immediately. So this was the change. I think was to remedy that, so that there's no announcement until after this process is over, so that the investigation is done, the adjudication process is done, and then there could be a fair announcement of, hey, yes, this fighter tested positive for this substance that was banned, but it came from a tainted supplement. She's only getting a 6-month suspension. So I think that ultimately that is a positive thing, because it's at least casting less negative light on fighters who really may not be guilty by that much. Maybe they took a banned substance, but it was in a tainted supplement, and we've seen that time and time again. I mean, I think there was I think USADA or the UFC released that more than 30%, more than a third of fighters who tested positive for something came from some kind of a tainted supplement. So I can understand the necessity to do that. The one thing that I still have an issue with is that, and I haven't seen it as much as I thought I would, but I mean, it has cropped up a couple times, is that speculation when a fighter's out for a long time or a fighter gets pulled from a card. There's speculation that, well, now we don't know if, since the UFC is no longer announcing these violations, is this fighter really out because he or she is injured, or is there a USADA potential violation in play? Shaun O'Malley announced it himself. Marvin Vettori recently announced himself that he tested positive or something, and he's going through the process, but we haven't seen anyone else do it. So there are surely fighters out there right now who are going through this process who failed a drug test that we don't know about, which is fine. But my concern is that for the innocent fighters who are just out injured or maybe out for personal reasons, there could be some speculation cast on them, like, well, are they really out for injuries, or are they out because of a possible failed drug test? So that's my only thing, but I think ultimately it has been a positive thing for the UFC, for fighters.
I mean, let people speculate, man. That's reckless speculation is what the internet is built upon, right? Like,
I hate it though. It's horrible.
Hey, man, that's how the game works. Ultimately, I think it's a net positive. You said a lot of what I was going to say, so I won't repeat a lot of it, and I'll keep it brief. But I think it's a net positive, just in that there isn't the rush to judgment. Like that's the ultimate thing. There are so many different examples we've seen over the past several years of fighters who were innocent that now have that stain on them, and for 6 months or 4 months or 8 months or however long it took to decide that, they were basically called cheaters. And once you're labeled with that label, that cheater label, it is insanely difficult to shed it, especially in a sport like this. So I am all in favor of, I feel like I said, it's been a net positive, just because there hasn't been a rush to speculation like it. And when a fighter like a Shaun O'Malley decides to let people know when he doesn't have to, I feel like there's also a sense of goodwill that comes from that, right? Because Marvin Vettori did it as well, Shaun O'Malley. If you're the one letting us know about the situation, I feel like there's less of a rush to judgment to say that you are the most terrible cheater on earth. Like it's more of a level. I don't know where I'm going exactly, but I feel like there's just a different element when the fighter can announce it himself, as opposed to just a very cold standard template of this is a potential violation.
Well, it gives the fighter a chance to get out in front of the news and give their side of the story, which in many cases I believe is honest. Like Shaun O'Malley came out and said he got pulled from UFC 229. He wanted to make the announcement himself and said, hey, I tested positive or something. It didn't come from, I wasn't taking it on purpose. It was not intentional. It's probably a tainted supplement. And he was able to get out in front of it, and no one has really killed him over it, because he was able to really give his side right away. And I wish that when those the UFC announcements of potential USADA violations came out, I wish fighters had been more proactive about giving their side of the story, like immediately, like right away. Like you learn about it and say, like, all right, this is going to come out. Let me get my side of the story out of there right away. Some of them did to, I think, their benefit, and some of them were quiet, and that hurt them. I think when you're quiet, I think more speculation gets cast on you.
Yeah. What's next?
All right, back to the MMA fighting comments. We got a little something from Dizzy Dwarf, one of our favorites here on the A side. Chaz Skelly controversy. What are your thoughts on the way the Chaz Skelly fight ended at UFC Denver? In my opinion, if he does not tap, and there's no doubt he is out cold, the ref should not step in and stop the fight. Also, thoughts on the same ref reviewing his own call. Surprise, surprise, he agreed with the original call. Something needs to change about that. Of course, Dizzy Dwarf is referring to the Chaz Skelly Bobby Moffett fight from UFC Denver last Saturday, where Moffett had Chaz Skelly in a Darce choke, and the referee called the fight off, saying it was a submission, thinking that Chaz Skelly was out, and it did not appear that Chaz Skelly was indeed out, and Skelly immediately disputed it, and he was up and challenging it right away. The referee looked at the instant replay and confirmed his own call, and Moffett was given the TKO win, which is just a whole another ridiculous story for another time. It should not be a TKO. It's a submission. It was a submission move, whatever. What do you think about the whole situation, Shaun?
So a lot has been said about this topic over the past couple of days, so I won't go too long on it, but all of it is just simply ridiculous. Like, I feel like everyone understands that it's ridiculous. Everything about the process from the beginning to the end is just an indictment on how stupid the commission, the setup with the rules and the commissions, and just how these officials are overseeing these events. Everything about it is stupid at this point, because he was defending exactly how you would defend in that situation. Bobby Moffett is an MMA lab guy who trains in here in Arizona, and I've been in the room with him when he's rolling with people, and he has a hell of a squeeze, man. If you give that fight 20 more seconds, maybe he finishes it off. But we don't know that yet. We have no idea, because we didn't get a chance to see it. Chaz Skelly, like he said, was defending it exactly how he needed to. Maybe he was on the road to losing, but we were robbed of the opportunity to actually see it. And so it ends up kind of hurting both guys, to be honest, because Bobby Moffett has to come out here and defend himself and get asked about a rematch after a UFC debut he's been waiting for a long time and worked a long time to get to. And he pulls off this sub, and no one's able to give him the full credit. And then Chaz Skelly's out here having to defend himself too. The whole situation is stupid, but my biggest issue with just the way that everything played out is the way that the process is set up. Because referee Tim Mills is effectively put in a position where he has no oversight above him, where he is the sole arbiter of oversight for his own call, right? Because he's the one who makes the call, the bad call, and then he's the one who gets to review the tape and decide whether he was wrong, rather than an impartial observer who may be more likely to get in there with a clear head. He is the one who is able to make that his own call. Human nature is that we want to be right, man, especially on like a big stage like that. Like, you don't want to tell the world that you're wrong and that you made a mistake that will be a bad mistake ultimately, because what's the best case scenario, right? Best case scenario is that there's a no contest because you can't restart the fight at that point. The fight's over. Worst case is we get what happened. So he doesn't want to put the blame on himself. He's the one watching the video. If you have an impartial person in there, at least watching the video, that's something. but just everything about the way that situation played out sucks. I feel bad for both guys. Credit to Skelly for saying I'm not going to appeal if it ends up with Bobby Moffett losing some of his purse, the win bonus. That's a hell of a thing to put out there. But man, I feel bad for both guys. The only way around it, it sucks that you can't restart the fight there. I know you can't. That doesn't make any sense. But the only way around it is for a referee to just err on the side of letting things go longer in the case of submissions, man, because the way the system is inherently set up now is just blatantly ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just a bad taste after watching that. It's unfortunate, and it kind of brings to mind the Kevin Lee Michael Chiesa situation too, where Chiesa was not quite out yet. Maybe he was going out. We don't know. He didn't tap, and Mario Yamasaki said the fight was over. It's very similar with this, where Skelly looked like he was. I mean, he immediately jumped up when the referee called the fight off. As far as the replay goes, it's tough because technically in the rules it says that the referee is the sole arbiter of what goes on, and the referee is the only person that can make that decision. So I kind of guess if you're following the rules, you have to have that referee who was in there watch the replay. But I do agree with you that it is just human nature to want to confirm your own previous decision by watching the replay. But it's a weird one, man. I do agree that if the fighter has not tapped, and maybe they're out, maybe they're not, I guess you do have to wait a little bit longer to see for sure, to confirm that some kind of sign other than what Skelly was giving, because yeah, his arm may have gone a little bit limp for a second, but you could very well say that was a way for him to defend the hold. By that's what he said in multiple interviews since then, that he was trying to relax to eventually defend better, so he can free up some space, which is what you do, is what you get taught to do. So it's just hard. It's just the whole situation is kind of unfortunate. But I will say this: Skelly has handled it as well as anyone could possibly handle these crappy situations, and he has been respectful to Bobby Moffett. He's really done a great job overall. Like you said, does not want to appeal if there's any possibility of Moffett losing his win bonus, which is just great. I just hope they do the fight again and see what happens. That's probably the best way to remedy this. But yeah, it's just a crappy situation overall. It's like, you see, we've seen it so many times in MMA where it's just like one of these things where it's just like, that just sucks on a number of levels for multiple parties involved.
The lack of oversight with commissions is just one of the biggest problems in this sport, to be honest, man.
I mean, Skelly could have appeal it. He could appeal it, and yeah, but then some kind of overturning.
The same thing where he'd be appealing to the body that already made the decision. Like, right. It's not. There's no sense of unbiasedness in this, because they're going to want to confirm what their already previous thing is. It's just, I don't know. It sucks for everybody.
It's very rare that a commission overturns those calls. The one time I can recall where they did was in Missouri, which I give them a ton of credit for overturning the Yana Kunitskaya Tanya Evinger fight.
Well, that one was bad. That one was really bad.
But look, I mean, I give them credit because a lot of commissions are very hesitant to overturn anything, and they did. So I give them credit for that. But yeah, I bet Skelly doesn't appeal. Let's just do the rematch over. I don't want to see anyone lose their win bonus either, but the whole thing just kind of stinks.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's keep moving on. Next cup coming from the MMA fighting page, from Farah Power. I know I'm saying that wrong. This one will be a quick one because there's a simple answer to it. He wants to know, why is everyone just ignoring the fact that we may never see Khabib fight again if he doesn't turn up for the hearing? He is definitely turning up for the hearing. His manager has confirmed to me that he is absolutely 100% turning up for that hearing. So there's no worry there. It would be ridiculous if he didn't.
Do you really think Khabib Nurmagomedov is not going to fight again? He just beat Conor McGregor and made a boatload of money. He's never going to fight again? Come on. Of course he's going to fight again. He'll show up to the hearing. He'll get whatever he gets as far as the suspension and a fine. It probably won't be that long of a suspension. And we'll see Khabib in the octagon before the halfway mark of 2019. I would bet money on it.
Yeah. I always love the questions that start with, why isn't anybody talking about? Those
because
are
usually there's not much to talk about.
Yeah,
if the question starts with, why is no one talking about this, there's usually a good reason why no one is talking about it, and I think we just explained why.
Yeah. So what's next?
From Wildcard 2 on the MMA Fighting comments, Cowboy, what should be next for Donald Cerrone? He's calling out Conor McGregor. Is there anything to that?
So that was an interesting one, man. That was one That it seemed like after Donald won on Saturday, he had a really great win on Saturday. Two names came up the most for him because he's coming down to 155 and he's teasing that he has a big fight. It was Conor and Justin Gaethje. Now it seems like Justin Gaethje is booked against Anthony Pettis, which, oh, be still my beating heart. That fight is so good. I cannot wait for that. So Conor is that one kind of sitting out there, right? And Donald's teasing it a little bit. Nothing can happen until Conor situation is very much like Dylan Dennis. Nothing can happen until that whole situation with the NAC is figured out. So that's Cowboy shooting his shot. I don't know if there's any smoke there to that fire, or if there's any fire there to that smoke, but that's just Cowboy shooting his shot while he can. There's still going to be a while before we even can hear about what's next for Conor. But I want to just transition really to talking about Cowboy Cerrone's win, because that was a pretty incredible performance, man. Like I spoke to Cowboy a few days before the fight, and I've talked to Cowboy a lot over the years. I really sensed something different in him this time for last week. The last time I talked to him before that was for the Leon Edwards fight, and his wife at that point was very, very, very pregnant. Like she was on the verge of giving birth right before that fight. But even in that conversation, it seemed like the same old Cowboy. It seemed like the exact same person he's always been. This last week was different, man. Like I even wrote a column about it that posted, like, I think on Saturday. He just came off very differently to me this entire week. And I even asked him, hey, how does it feel to have this kid? Like, has it changed your life? All the cliche stuff. And at the time he's saying, no, it hasn't really changed anything. I don't know why people keep asking me that. I know it's a cliche, but it just hasn't changed anything. I'm the same guy. But you could get the sense that that's not true, man. And he realized it like right before that fight. It seemed like he was getting emotional talking about it even. And I get the sense just from how he acted last week, because the old Cowboy responds to that Mike Perry situation, the Mike Winklejohn situation, very differently than the way he did last week. I get the sense that he has become extremely aware that he is sort of hitting this stretch run in his career, and now he really does have this new perspective as a father. Like he's kind of stopping to smell the roses, and we haven't really ever seen Cowboy stop to smell the roses. Like he's a full-grown man. Like he's nearing 40. He's just started his own promotion even, and he's trying to be like a mentor for this younger generation. He's doing Cowboy Fight Series where he's going to take the winners of the fight series and bring them up into the ranch and try to like mentor them. And then in the cage afterwards, like seeing him get emotional with his son, holding him like Simba, like that's really the closest we've ever seen Cowboy to actually getting emotional in that sense. I feel like he's I don't know, man. I feel like he's in a really good place, and I'm really interested to see how this last stretch run at 155 goes, because he's been trying to get back to 155 for a long time now. He's said he wanted it for the past several fights. I'm glad to finally see it happen. It seems like he's going to take it more seriously, like he's going to get a nutritionist, etc. I'm just really curious to see what's next for him, man, because I really get a sense that he is a different person now after maybe maturing a little bit, but also having this kid than he was before.
We had talked a lot about what would be next for Conor McGregor over the last few weeks, and Cowboy Cerrone is not a name that we really mentioned because obviously he was at welterweight. He was going to be fighting last week at UFC Denver. Was not really a name on the radar, but after the win and after what he said afterward about having a big fight lined up, the first name that entered my head was Conor McGregor. And it kind of checks the boxes to what we were talking about the last few weeks about what kind of fight McGregor should get next. And I know that I've said Anderson Silva, and hey, I'm still on board with that.
Can't
by the way,
go a single episode.
Still on board.
Oh my God, cannot go a single episode.
But I like the idea of Conor versus Cowboy for a number of reasons, because, and yes, you are 100% right that they can't book McGregor until the commission situation is taken care of. We know that his hearing is in December 10th, and then we'll see how long he's suspended, if at all, and then they can figure out when he's back and against who. But the Cowboy fight is a very interesting fight because, first of all, they do have a little bit of history. They had that confrontation at the Go Big press conference in 2015 where they went back and forth. It was very entertaining. People were very into that interaction then. Also, McGregor at this point, we've talked about this. He's lost to Nurmagomedov. He's lost to Nate Diaz. He has that loss against Floyd Mayweather. Fans have seen him lose a whole lot over the last few years, and he needs probably someone who's not a top 2 or 3 lightweight, which I think that Donald Cerrone right now is not a top 2 or 3 lightweight as far as right now. Could he be with the win or two? Of course, he has that potential to be, but he's a little bit of a step back from the competition that McGregor was fighting, you could say. So in that way, I think it's a good thing because it is a more quote unquote winnable fight for McGregor. On the other side of that, Cowboy is a big name. And that's also good with what McGregor needs. He needs a big name, but also someone who's not going to take him down and maul him like Nurmagomedov tried to do. That's why I also mentioned Anderson Silva in that conversation, because it's very. I know you hate it. I know you hate it. But let's say Cowboy gets the McGregor fight and beats McGregor. Then there's an amazing story on that side. So it's really in some ways a win-win for the UFC. Because if you have Cowboy fighting McGregor and Cowboy wins, what an amazing story that is for the guy who has the most wins in UFC history, the most finishes in UFC history, goes out and beats McGregor. Then you probably have a big money fight with him against Nurmagomedov. Then you have this line of guys going toward Khabib. So I think that in many ways is a very, very interesting fight. I think it's obviously a pay-per-view headliner because I think Cowboy has a big enough name. I saw a few people asking us maybe in Twitter and on the comments that McGregor should get a bigger name like Max Holloway. I think Cowboy is a bigger name than Max Holloway. I think Cowboy is a bigger name than most guys that have been in the conversation with McGregor. If you're even a casual MMA fan, you've heard the name Cowboy Cerrone. You've probably seen Cowboy Cerrone fight. He's one of the most exciting guys there has ever been in that division. He's one of the more charismatic guys. He's got a great story about him, and now even more so that you mentioned with having the kid and kind of dad Cowboy is kind of like the next like iteration of this man's story, and he's coming off that great win against Mike Perry. The iron is hot, so I'd be all in for Conor versus Cowboy. I really would be. I think that actually might be the most. I don't want to say logical fight because none of this is logical, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I really do.
Yeah, like you said, I think that checks a lot of the boxes, right? Because the history's there with that press conference. He's a big enough name. He's a big enough personality. And I also think like you said, he's a more mainstream figure. Like that could do some serious business in the mainstream sector. Lead up would be really fun.
Lead up would be great. I mean, that could sell that could sell a million. It could sell a million pay-per-views.
It's a good stylistic matchup for Conor too.
Exactly.
I don't know. I doubt it kind of happens for some reason. I just don't think Conor would take that fight, but maybe he will. Maybe he'll get back in line like that. One last thing I want to ask you before we switch topics, because I've been thinking about this myself. Is Cowboy Cerrone a Hall of Famer to you?
Yes, I think he is.
No,
I really do.
No, with no championship win, is he a Hall of Famer in your eyes?
I do. I really do feel that way. He does have the most wins in UFC history. He has the most finishes, as we said. And he is a larger than life figure. He is a guy that you do remember. He's not just another guy. I mean, he's Cowboy Cerrone. He is a name that I think will live on in the annals of the UFC because he may have never won that big fight. He may have never won that title fight, but he's a guy that's been around forever. He's beaten a bunch of guys. He's been exciting. He's drawn new fans to the sport. I mean, yeah, he's been the ultimate company man. And you know what? It's not over. Maybe Cowboy Cerrone has a Michael Bisping run in him where someone falls out of a fight and Cowboy Cerrone gets a title fight, and all of a sudden we're talking about Cowboy Cerrone being a UFC champion in 2019. It's not out of the realm of possibility. No one thought Michael Bisping would be UFC champion. No one thought he would even fight Luke Rockhold in that fight, or let alone beat him, and that happened. So who the hell knows? It could happen. It could happen.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I've kind of come to that conclusion because titles are one thing, but longevity is another. And longevity is a skill unto itself, and probably the hardest skill in this game to be able to stay at a high level, at a world-class level for as long as Cowboy has. That is rare, man. You don't see that ever. You see that in a few guys a generation, and that's it. So I think that has to count for something, especially in a game like this where a lot of it is kind of up to the whims of the promoter, right? Like you can steer your own fate to a certain degree, but if you don't get it, I think Cowboy only has one title fight, and there could have been a billion other times where he could have got another title shot, but it just never came together. I think I agree with you. I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I feel that way. I guess we'll move on here now back to the MMAfighting.com comments section as my computer takes forever to load. KO of the year from Wildcard 2. Another question from Wildcard 2. Yair Rodriguez's last second elbow has to be KO of the year, right? I don't even know what else would come close. I've never seen anything like that. Is that fight of the year too?
Thoughts? So yes. So yeah, I mean that's KO of the year to me. I was trying to rack my brain, think of like what other ones would come close. Somebody mentioned Machida Belfort. I think that's probably up there. Derek Lewis, Volkov, considering the circumstances, that's probably up there. And then also another sneaky one to remember is Nico Price versus Randy Brown. Those hammer fists from the bottom when he kind of like hooked his leg around Brown's head. I've never seen anything like that in high-level MMA before. So I feel like those are kind of in the top options. But yeah, Yair Rodriguez's KO was KO of the year for me, and it's not even close. It might be KO of the effing decade. Like, that was unbelievable. And that was honestly just one of the moments where, because like that whole fight was so good. That whole fight was just like a gorgeous work of art where it's just like, it's like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night. And it's just like, that's what you need to sustain you, man. Like after a long show like that, like something like that really just reminds you of how beautiful this whole sport is, because I didn't end up going to sleep until like 3:30 a.m. that night because I was just so jacked up from the adrenaline of that. It really is the best sport. But yeah, I think that fight, that knockout is easily knockout of the year. As for fight of the year, I think it's on the list. I wouldn't give it the top spot, though. I think I still have Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier in the lead for that. I was in the arena for that fight, and it was just unbelievable. Edge of your seat, just magic playing out in front of you. Also, I would put Tony Ferguson versus Anthony Pettis in there. I know that was only a few rounds, but I'd still put it ahead of it. It was just madness. And Whitaker Romero, too, also because of the stakes and how crazy that one was.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on those fight of the years, but yeah, Yair Rodriguez's KO is probably the craziest KO I've ever seen in MMA, and I have watched a lot of fights. I don't remember one. I mean, it had everything. I mean, it has the violence aspect, which of all the things you look for as far as like a KO of the year contender or a KO of the whatever contender, you need the violence factor. You need that stunning, like, oh my God part of it, right? It's important, even though, it's people don't like talking about the violence, but hey, we kind of like violence here. We watch fights for a living. So the violence factor has to be there. I think the creativity factor is very important too, because there are some punch knockouts that win KO of the year. Last year, Ngannou against Overeem was KO of the year, in my opinion, even though it was only a punch because of everything that came with that punch. But the creativity factor is very important too. And this was the most creative knockout I've seen in some time because of just the angle that it came in from, the timing that happened. It was a back elbow where, I mean, he wasn't even like a no look. It was like a no look knockout. It was insane. So from that factor, it's a 10 out of 10. And then of course the timing and the stakes as far as the fight goes. Yair Rodriguez was going to lose that fight if the fight went one more second. If it went one more second, Rodriguez loses that fight. If he does not land that ridiculous elbow, the fight is over and Korean Zombie wins. So to me, all those things together, last second, the ridiculous creativity of the elbow, and also the violence factor and the sheer like visceral nature of Zombie just collapsing to the mat. To me, I think that's the best KO I've seen in the UFC ever. I think that's the best KO in UFC history because of all those things put together.
Man, it's hard to argue with you. Can we take a moment to salute the Korean Zombie for in a fight where he is about to win, like you said, 1 second away from winning. That dude is still charging forward, guns blazing, head in the air, fists flying, just trying to get something done, even with 1 second left to go. Like, oh my God, man. What a madman. Both those dudes. That hospital pig is instantly legendary. Like, I cannot say enough good things about that fight. That fight totally just made my whole Saturday better.
It's crazy because Korean Zombie, the story would have been great if he just lasts one more second. The story is he comes back from more than a year layoff, needed knee surgery, came back, and then beat a very good prospect at 145 in a war of a fight. The old Zombie is back. He won a decision over Yair Rodriguez, and he's back to being a force in the 145-pound division after coming back from that previous almost 4-year layoff and knocking out Dennis Bermudez last year. That would have been an amazing narrative. Of course, it didn't happen that way, but you have to give all the credit to Zombie. Yeah, I know that Chan Sung Jung fans are probably pissed off that he took that crazy risk at the end of the fight, but
that's who he is.
That's why we love him, right? That's why we love him.
That's who he is. That's who he is, man. That's why he's a fan favorite. He was still going for it at the last second.
Absolutely. Back to the.
Well, hey, let's. We've been talking for an hour already. We got to get to Twitter because we have a ton of Twitter questions.
Okay, one last thing from the MMA fighting comments. I'll answer this one quick. It's from Hefe01 about Brock Lesnar being in the USADA pool. Brock Lesnar is back in the testing pool, and the last time I checked, he had 6 tests in 2018. My buddy is a WWE fan. Says Brock looks noticeably smaller. Is there a chance that a clean Brock may actually get to fight for the heavyweight title? Could USADA's new policy about not announcing possible failures be the reason that DC took on the Black Beast? DC has also been a lot more realistic about other potential fights since he fought Derek Lewis, not hanging his hat on Brock. Anything to that? So just a couple things about this. The reason why Cormier took the fight with Derek Lewis is that Brock is actually not off his USADA suspension from the Marc Hunt fight at UFC 200 until early January. So DC had a little bit of a window there to take a fight while Brock was getting back. I don't know anything as far as the USADA UFC announcing policy, if that's affecting anything. I don't think, as far as I know, that Brock Lesnar has tested positive for anything. So I think in DC's mind, that fight is still in line. But I think DC is also being practical and pragmatic, knowing that you never know what's going to happen with Brock. Brock just signed a new deal with WWE that could also put that fight with DC in jeopardy with timing-wise. We talked about it last week. WrestleMania is in April. Is Brock really going to want to fight DC in March and then have to headline possibly WrestleMania in April? Don't know. But that fight to me is very much TBA. I think it's still the one DC wants, but we just don't know enough about. Even if Brock is clean and doesn't fail a drug test, I don't know if that timing works out with him in WWE if the DC fight actually happens.
Yeah, well said. Also, one that I want to revisit before we go to Twitter. I promised we would get to it, and I totally forgot. From the Empire 91, he wants to ask on the MMA fighting page, typical day for an MMA journalist. What is a typical day like when you are not on the road covering an event? I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know how many people are interested in it, so I'll be brief. But it's, I don't know. I mean, it's a very busy life. Working from home is a weird thing, I will say, because you're never off work and the news never stops. So from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, you're basically working in this job. And I love this job. I'm so lucky and blessed to have it. So I'm not complaining at all. But if something happens at 11 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock at night and John Jones shoots someone in the face or whatever it is, like, you got to be up and ready to work your ass off for it. So it is they are long days, but they are fun days.
So my typical day, not on the road, starts with me waking up, rolling over, looking at my phone, cursing to myself, jumping out of bed, and either sending off emails, sending off text messages, making a phone call, or writing an article. That's pretty much how my day begins. And that exact process repeats itself throughout the day. I look at my phone, I curse under my breath, I start writing. Or I look at my phone, curse under my breath, and I start making phone calls. That's pretty much my entire day when I'm not on the road. And even when I'm on the road, it's pretty much the same principle until about 1 a.m. when I crash. That's pretty much my days.
Yeah, man, it's nonstop. Like, if anybody's ever hung out with Marc, he's probably carrying his backpack because he just carries his
everywhere I go.
Carries that laptop
lunch. If I go to dinner, I mean anything. When I go to the gym, my backpack is always nearby. Yeah, my laptop is always very close.
Yeah, we are very lucky to work at home, though. I mean, I never ever complain about that. It is a very interesting and cool job.
It has its pros and cons because you work at home and it feels like the workday is never over. It's just like you're just constantly working. And again, like you said, I'm not trying to complain. This is a great job. It's a really rewarding, fun job. Most of the time, it sucks some of the time too, but it is like an endless. It's like a lifestyle more than a job. It's like if you're in this job, like that's a good part of your life that you're gonna be dealing with all this MMA stuff pretty much all day. Every
Also,
day.
our significant others are very they're very great for dealing with our BS.
God, I know. Thank God.
I cannot tell you the amount of times that we've had plans with me and my fiance, and it's just like, oh, sorry, babe, I can't do this anymore.
Oh yeah,
something came.
That's a weekly event.
Yeah. Hey, let's move to Twitter, man. It's already 12:15 over here.
Why are you talking so much, Shaun?
I know, right? I'm so wordy. Let's we got a ton of Twitter questions today. You want to start, or you need me to get one?
I'm just checking out a lot of these are ones that we
All right, here. I got you.
All right.
First one's coming from Eduardo Bueno.
Yes.
We're a listener. True or false? This is an interesting one. Chuck versus Tito does less than 300,000 buys. If you would have asked me this a month ago, I would have
30,000 or 300,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, 30. I think I said 300.
All right.
If you would have asked me this 2 months ago, I would have said there's no way in hell it does less than that. But right now, maybe it does. I'm going to say false, but I think it'll be not much higher than that, unless the promotion really kicks up and they do some fight week stuff that is different than what they've been doing.
Yeah, I think it does more than that, but certainly it does not do as much as I thought it would back in the summer. It just doesn't. It's just not. The promotion hasn't been there. Look, I mean, criticize the UFC and say that MMA is like pro wrestling, but man, a good pro wrestling angle between the two of those guys would definitely push some pay-per-views next week.
Also, the card is not good, man. MMA fans are used to paying a lot of money for 6 fights or 5 fights, and that card is not a good card.
I feel like if this fight card was like, if it was $30 instead of $50, I think that would be a lot more digestible for fans. I think this was like a $29.99 price point. I think they would do very well. $49.99 may be a tough ask for the depth, because like you said, MMA fans are much more used to paying for the full card. Of course, we always know that the main event is the biggest key for pay-per-view buys, but MMA fans do have a certain expectation that the card is going to at least have more than just 1 or 2 good fights. And this one, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 good fights.
Oscar De La Hoya, master promoter.
Hey man, I again, like you said earlier, I'm not sure about his boxing promotion prowess, but unless something changes next week, I'm not high on how Golden Boy's promoted this fight. I'm just not.
All right, what's next?
I'm still looking from Chris, I guess, from the UFC recently updated their website interface, and it's terrible. Thoughts? Also, who would be the featherweight title alternate given Max's recent struggles? Hoping it isn't Aldo. Well, I can answer that last one real quick. It's going to be the Renato Moicano and Mirsad Bektik are on that card. So I believe Moicano would be the guy in line to fight Ortega if Holloway is unable to fight. Have you seen the new UFC.com, Shaun?
I have. It seems difficult to manage, to navigate.
It's very early. I mean, I've been a part myself of relaunches. We have been in MMA fighting. We relaunched
multiple relaunches, yeah.
And there are always bugs. There are always issues early on. You have to give it. I mean, when we first relaunched MMA fighting, people crapped on us too. Remember, we got some heat for the logo and now everyone's fine. It just takes some time. People do not like change that much, and there are always issues in the first few days and few weeks of a relaunch. There are always bugs and crappy things going on, but hopefully those will get corrected. I think in 2 months no one will care that UFC.com changed. It'll be fine.
I've been a part of 4 or 5 rebrands, relaunches for MMA fighting, and each one followed the exact same pattern where everyone's freaking out for like the first 2 days, 3 days, and then it just goes away.
Who cleared the lightning bolt logo? Like whose idea was that? That was before my time in MMA fighting. That's awful.
How dare you? Those were the golden years.
Was that your It was your idea, wasn't it? That was your
idea. No, I think when I came on, that was already what it was.
That's a horrible logo. Sorry, SB Nation.
Hey, it's very early 2000s. It's very early 2000s.
It is.
All right.
That logo deserves a Face the Pain playing over it.
All right, calm down over there. You were just at the New York Post doing whatever at that point. So I was part
of a relaunch of nypost.com. Yeah, that was not fun. That was many hours.
All right. Well, hey, next up, coming from Twitter, comes from Zuha, who wants to know breakout UFC stars of 2018. Who are the biggest breakout stars of 2018 for you, Mark?
The biggest breakout stars of 2018.
Israel Adesanya is going to win every breakout fighter of the year column for the next 2 months.
Yes. There's no doubt that Adesanya is the breakout fighter of 2018. I will give an honorable mention, a runner-up to Tatiana Suarez.
Yes,
who I think has come in this year to 2018 and has established herself as not only a front runner for a potential title shot, but a fighter that many believe is the future champion at women's strawweight. So I would say Tatiana Suarez is behind Adesanya, but certainly someone who has made a name in 2018 as someone to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if we just keep mentioning this now, I think Curtis Blades has made a lot of progress this year. He's kind of right there in title contention. I don't know that anybody expected that so soon. And I know he's a divisive figure and a lot of people don't like him, but Colby Covington has really made some waves this year, man. And people know his name a lot more than they did last year.
Very true. Very true. Has lost a little bit of that momentum, though, unfortunately.
Yeah. Also, let me real quick, because I don't know if this qualifies, but would you count Henry Cejudo as a breakout star of 2018?
I would say no, because he's already fought for a title in the UFC. This was his second go-around fighting DJ. Yes, he did win this time, but I wouldn't say that's a breakout. I think he was already a pretty established guy.
Yeah.
Just my take.
What's next?
All right, back to the Twitter from Arpan Lobo. How do you feel about Patricio Freire, of course, Patricio Pitbull, saying he's better than Aldo and saying that Aldo quit and was gifted a belt?
I don't feel much about it, I guess. I don't know.
This sounds like trash talk to me, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
that sounds like he's trying to get himself a fight. He was also, I think, was it his brother who was saying he would trade the other Pitbull brother to get Aldo in the promotion? It seems like they just really want to fight Jose Aldo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think Patricio Pitbull has felt for a long time like he is the best 145 pounder in the world, or one of at least the best 145 pounders in the world. And he doesn't always get that due because he's in Bellator, and the fighters in the UFC obviously get a lot more mainstream and I mean, just regular MMA coverage too. So I think he's had a chip on his shoulder for a long time. Look, he's an excellent fighter. He is an elite fighter, maybe the best fighter ever in Bellator. I mean, I think his resume as far as best fighters ever in Bellator, he's pretty high on that list. But I mean, I just chalk this up to trash talk. Yeah, I think he's just look. Those guys like to talk trash, and I'm here for it. I like it, so I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't agree, by the way, but I don't have a problem with the trash talk.
Next up, coming from David Edmond, who writes, I have a weird one. Diego Sanchez versus Conor, a wrestling test and a nutcase. Also, the buildup would be great. And if it gave Diego a big payday before he stops, then that would be good as well. Diego Sanchez versus Conor do anything for you, Mark? No, absolutely not. Diego is just not a big enough name at this stage to be the B-side to McGregor. I mean, that does nothing for me. Diego's also fighting at 170 right now, and he's been pretty open about wanting to stay at 170. So no, that fight does absolutely nothing for me. Likewise, I don't have much to add.
I guess we'll go back to Zuha from the Twitter machine. What does an MMA fighter need to do to ensure that he doesn't have to fight at 48 years of age for money?
Oof, that's rough.
First, quit MMA and get a city or a government job and make a pension. That's number one. Look, man, most fighters, 90%, 85, 90. Okay, I'll say 90% of MMA fighters will not make enough money. And not saying UFC fighters, I'm saying MMA fighters will not make enough money to live comfortably at the age of 48 without continuing to work.
I think
that's a fair statement.
I think 90% is generous. I would put that at like 95 or 90.
95% of 95% of MMA fighters in the world will not make enough money to live a comfortable life when they're 48 years old without working. So you either get a job after MMA or you continue fighting. That's pretty much the options there for 95% of fighters. Now, some fighters will be fine. They retire and they're good. And it's not just them either. You know, 48 years old, you got a family, you know, you got kids, you got a wife or you got a husband, you know, you have a bunch of responsibilities. So you're either fighting at that age still, or you're getting another job for the vast majority of these fighters. Even if you're incredibly frugal, right, and you save a ton of money in your career, that's just how it goes.
I will say though, one thing I've noticed about the newer generation that's coming up and just the younger people in the sport today, they definitely have a better sense of that than the people who came before them. Because the generation who came before them, a lot of the guys, especially like the Chuck Liddell generation, they really missed out on a lot of this, to be honest. They really crested right before all of the giant money came into the sport. I think a lot of the kids now, who the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, have an idea that they need to have a backup plan in case this doesn't work out. And I've talked to a lot of young fighters who are in their early 20s who are already setting up other potential revenue streams, but also just other potential businesses, like other potential opportunities, whether it's sponsorships or other type of things that they could do to try to supplement that and also create some sort of a backup plan. It feels like the newer generation is not going to have as many of these type of sad stories as maybe the past few.
Yeah, and I hope that's true, and I do see what you're saying. But also by the same token, like, I can't retire at age 48. Like, I gotta keep working. Now, granted, I don't fight in a cage for a living. I cover cage fighting for a living, but
yeah, it's a little different though, because me and you we don't have to change jobs at age 40. Like we don't have to abandon a lifetime of skills that we've spent years and years developing and try to figure out something new entirely. So I don't know that that's
sure. But I mean, I'm just saying it's not altogether different for MMA fighters as it would be for anyone else in the workforce, where at 48 you can't just retire and live off what you made. Most people can't. Again, 90+% of people can't do that.
Yeah. Do you have any more left, or you want to jump to the promo?
Let's do one more from Strike.mx. Which fight is more competitive, Nunes versus Cyborg or Valentina versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk?
I think Valentina versus Joanna. I think Nunes' style is tailor-made to be an easier fight for Cyborg than somebody like Holly Holm.
Really interesting. That's very interesting. I think I actually think Cyborg Nunes is more competitive.
So you think Joanna just gets the doors blown off her then?
Oh no, I didn't. Okay, why are you? What are you doing here? Why are you putting words in my mouth?
I'm just extrapolating upon what you said.
No, look, I think that Cyborg Nunes is a bit more competitive, but I'm not saying it's way more competitive. But I think it's slightly more competitive than Joanna versus Shevchenko, because I think that Shevchenko. And again, we haven't seen Joanna at 125, and it's possible that she's even better at that weight class. I mean, I would guess that she will be even better at that weight class than 115. But I also feel like her prime is kind of, we've already seen her prime as the strawweight champion, and I think she may be slightly on the decline. I could be wrong. Whereas I think Shevchenko has shown that she could be a monster. She's also bigger. You know, she's also bigger. Cyborg is bigger than Nunes too, but I think it'll make a difference in that fight more. But what the hell do I know? I mean, I think that both fights are going to be great. I can't wait. And I would have put both those fights on my proposed all women's fantasy booking card too. Had they not already been made, they're already made, so they're not fantasy. But those are phenomenal fights.
Okay, so you think Joanna's going to get the doors blown off her? I got it.
And that's not what I said. Why are you putting words in my mouth? See, this is how Reddit threads start, Shaun. This is how the game of telephone starts. Now I'm gonna be getting tweets about, well, you said Joanna Jędrzejczyk sucks and Valentina's gonna crush her. I did not say that at all. I think that both women are fantastic.
People, all you people out there heard exactly what Marc said.
It's complete BS.
All right. Well, hey, this has been a fun show. Let's do the promo and then we'll get out of here. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I will go first. I'll go first. Yours are usually better than mine, so you can close it down. I just wanted to address real quick. I wrote an article about this on Tuesday morning. It was published about the Nevada Athletic Commission. The Nevada Athletic Commission very quietly a few weeks ago at the same meeting where they extended the McGregor and Nurmagomedov temporary suspensions, they also voted on a bunch of new regulations and change regulations, including the unified rules of MMA, the much talked about and ballyhooed new rules of MMA. And they voted on the new rules and they approved them, except for one, which is really the big one, the one that everyone has talked about, the one that has been the most polarizing of the new rules, the grounded fighter definition. And the Nevada Athletic Commission chose to adopt all of the rules except for that one, which means there are going to be even more situations where we're talking about, well, which rules are in place in which states. Now, I'm not faulting Nevada specifically for this because at the end of the day, they have to do what is best for their state and their commission, and they felt like it was unhealthy. They felt like it was potentially too dangerous to implement that rule unnecessarily. Because, and just to real quick go over what the rules are, the original rule that still many states and most states have in place is if you have both soles of your feet and only one other part of the body down, you are considered grounded, and thereby a kick or knee to the head is illegal. The new rules state that you can have both soles of your feet down, but if you're going to put your hands down, they have to be both hands. You can't just put a finger or one hand. It's got to be both hands, palms, or fists down to be down. Of course, a knee is still down, but as far as the hands go, they have to be both of them. So we've seen fighters try to play the game, quote unquote, where they put a finger down, and all right, they're down, they can't be kneed in the head, whatever. So we're in a position now where there are 3 rule sets being used, really. There's the rule sets that are being used in California, New York, Mohegan Sun. Those are the new rules. There are rule sets being used in New Jersey and Missouri and Ohio and Texas. Those are the old rules. And now there is a kind of a mixed bag being used in Nevada. And to make a long story short, what I'm saying is it's even more challenging now for fighters to figure out, well, which rules are in place in this state. In the middle of a fight, fighters may have to think, well, can I knee this man or this woman in the head right now in this state? Where am I? Am I in Nevada? Am I in California? Can I do this in the fight? Meanwhile, there's 20,000 people in the stands and there's another person trying to take their head off, and they have to wonder, well, what state am I in right now? Same thing for the referees. Referees have to worry, well, what state am I in right now? It's a split-second choice. Split second I got to make. Well, hold on. Am I in Nevada? Am I in New York? Where am I? And then who knows what happens? Then a fighter, gets knocked out brutally because the referee doesn't know where the hell they are in that moment. It's just bad. The fact that there is no unified rules, even though they're called unified rules, is bad for the sport, bad for the fighters, bad for everyone. And at this point, I just wish they came to a consensus and just had one rule set. I don't care if it's the old rules, the new rules, some combination, amalgamation of both rule sets. Just stick to one rule set and be done with it. I know there are politics in place. I know that both sides have their arguments for which is better and which is not. To me, the main thing is to just make everything the same again, like it was, so there is no confusion. And the confusion is actually more dangerous than I think than either one of the rules are. I think that the confusion is actually what could cause harm, and I hope that goes away soon. Hopefully next year at the ABC conference in July, there'll be some consensus come to, but here's hoping.
Oh my God, my head is hurting.
I know. I hope that made sense. I hope that those descriptions made sense. But
I mean, what you said makes sense. What they're doing doesn't make sense. My ongoing frustration and exhaustion with commissions is just ongoing. How do you have 3 different rule sets in one country? You got a referee. You got the best referees in the game, the Herb Deans, the Marc Godders, whoever. They travel basically every day. They're basically on the road in a new place every week. And now you got to make those guys think, like you said, in a split-second moment, where am I? Where am I today? Anybody who travels a lot, like, you understand how how easy it is to get to that frame of mind of just like, oh wait, where am I right now? And now you're adding that extra step. It's so ridiculous, man. It's because
a lot of this stuff for fighters and for referees is muscle memory, where you're not really thinking in the cage, right? You're just doing because that's what you've done so many times. That's what you've repped. That's what your body just knows how to do. And you can't really do that because it's different in every state. There's not just one consistent rule set. So you can't really have that muscle memory because your muscle memory could be incorrect depending on where you are.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I get any more angry, I'm going to just do mine. Well said though, Marc. So this week, UFC bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw went on our old friend Ariel Helwani's show, and he spoke a little bit about his move down to flyweight to fight Henry Cejudo, a story which you and I helped break this past week, and also the genesis behind sort of the move and why he wanted to do it. And so I'm going to read you just a quick excerpt from his interview with Ariel. Quote, "They're paying me a fuckload of money to move down and kill the 125-pound division." He went on to add, "If I'm the champ in both weight classes, why even have it being flyweight? All of the attention is at 135 anyway. So at the end of the day, make the guys that they believe should stick around come up and challenge for the 135-pound belt." Okay, now there's a lot to unpack there, but let me just say this: file this as reason number 456 why a fighters union will never ever work in this sport. It will never happen. Because it was literally, if you guys remember, it was literally just 2 years ago that TJ Dillashaw was on the executive board. He was one of the executive board members of the extremely short-lived MMAAA. And he wasn't just a member of the executive board. He was one of the most vocal members. That was at a time right after TJ Dillashaw made $25,000 and $25,000 for his UFC 200 win over Rafael Sunsao. That was his first fight after losing the title to Dominic Cruz. And 25 and 25 is obviously a ridiculous salary, especially for a former champ. And Dillashaw was upset about his contract and sort of upset about not getting another title shot. And all throughout that process, he spoke a lot about all the times about the myriad ways the UFC is screwing over their fighters and how hard and frustrating of a life it is to lead. And a lot of it made sense. A lot of it was very much like, hey, good on you for speaking up in this instance. And I remember one of his most famous quote was, "We're treated worse than an employee." All of which brings me to now and how I can't help but think how hollow those words ring 2 years later when he's basically out here not just marginalizing a bunch of fighters, but basically joking around about 30 or 40 or 50 of his fellow athletes, depending on who the UFC keeps around at 135, most likely losing their livelihoods, their life's work, at a whim, just sort of despite whatever contract statuses they may have had with the UFC, despite whatever rankings they may have achieved, despite whatever many fights they may still be owed by the company contractually, and they're about to lose their jobs, and he's making light of it. And hey, I get it, man. I'm not one to moralize ever. I try to very hard to not ever be the guy on his pulpit moralizing about stupid stuff like this, especially because I hate it when sports writers do that. Fighting and especially MMA is an inherently selfish game. You have to look out for yourself because no one is going to look out for you. So let this not be an indictment on Dillashaw's decision to fight Henry Cejudo. He was presented with an opportunity. Go try to get that second belt. Go make that money. Go try to make history. But when you're the guy who, when everything is not going your way, you talk about how the system needs to change and you preach about all of this moralizing about fighters' rights. And then as soon as you get yours, your entire tune changes and you become the guy joking about being the reason countless number of fighters are about to lose everything they've worked for, their jobs, their incomes, their potential future opportunities. You don't really get the chance to be mad if people start looking at everything you've said as nothing more than self-serving at best and insincere at worst, because it just doesn't make sense, man. So I understand there's talking trash and all of this, but just doesn't jive with what we were hearing 2 years ago. So I guess that's all.
By the way, the MMA-AAA lasted about as long as it takes to say MMA-AAA. Like, when you get through those A's, no, that's it. They're done. It's over.
God, what a terrible name for a fighters association that was. Had them all wearing the shirts too, and it had that awful logo. What a weird chapter in MMA history that was.
Not even a chapter. It was like a footnote. It was nothing. It was a few weeks.
I don't even know if it was a few weeks, because right after, like 2 days later, Donald Cerrone said he didn't know what he was getting into, and then George St. Pierre got what he ended up needing and got out of the situation. Like the whole thing just fell apart so fast.
What a disaster.
Yeah. Well, hey, on that happy fun note, this has been another episode of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. We had a ton of questions, and we very much appreciate it. You guys ask wonderful questions, as always. Hopefully, we were able to entertain you in some way. The replay of this show will be coming up on YouTube almost immediately. Later this day, we'll get a podcast form up on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you want it. And like I said, always at the top, if there's a place you like your podcast that we are not on, let Marc or I know, because we will immediately get it on that place. In the meantime, it's a busy weekend, man. Enjoy the fights. And thank you once again for joining us on the A-Side. Same place, same time next week. You have anything for the people, Marc, before we let it go?
A-Side.
Yes.
Where's our song? Where's our song?
We're going to find a way to incorporate that song into this show. We just need technical help to be able to do that. This is a very low budget show right now.
We definitely need help. That's for sure.
Well, hey, thank you guys again for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.